Hey guys, this is Prateek, a mentor with Udacity for Business Analyst Nano Degree, and I welcome you all to this webinar on basic SQL commands. So most of the students in our cohort are done with project 1, project 2, in which we discussed about interpreting data visualization and making sense out of the visualizations we have and how to get insights from these visualizations, data visualizations. And then in the second project, we learned about descriptive statistics, and we also learned about how to perform data analysis in Excel and how to create dashboards in Excel. So now, in this particular project, we are going to study about SQL. And This webinar is on basic SQL commands, and I'll be having two more, webinars on SQL, which are going to be more advanced than this. So this is just a basic introduction to SQL. So let me just quickly get started with the agenda for this particular webinar. So yeah, I'll be starting with what SQL is. Then I'll be telling you what SQL can do and why we use SQL. I'll be telling you about brief history of SQL, then some SQL commands which are there, and then I'll be talking about what RDBMS is. And then we'll be moving to the fun part, which is we'll be practicing few SQL queries and learning about how to write SQL queries on HackerRank. And then I'll have Q&A session, and if you guys have any questions, you can just ask me that time and I'll answer your queries. So getting started with the SQL, SQL stands for, or SQL is also pronounced as SQL by a lot of people. So SQL stands for Structured Query Language, which is a computer language for storing, manipulating, and retrieving data stored in a relational database. SQL is the standard language for relational database system, and all the relational database management systems like MySQL, MS Access, Oracle, all of them, uses SQL as their standard database language. So what SQL can do? Well, SQL can help you do a lot of things. Like, it can help you execute queries against a database. It can help you retrieve the data from a database, insert records in a database, update the records in a database, delete something in a database, create something new in a database. It can be a database or it can be a table in the database, or creating the views and setting permission on tables, and a lot of things. There are a lot of things which you can do in SQL. So why SQL? SQL is very popular, and you do want to know why it is so popular among so many people. So the reason behind why SQL is because it allows user to access data in relational database management system. Then it also allows user to describe the data. It allows the user to define the data in a database and manipulate the data. It also allows to embed within other languages using SQL modules, libraries, like you can do that in Python and R. Then it also allows user to create and drop database in tables. And it also allows to create views, stored procedures, functions in a database. And also, it allows you to set permission on tables and procedures and views, like who all can access that particular table. So basically, you can set permission to that as well. Now, talking about a brief history of SQL, Dr. Edgar F. Cord of IBM is known as the father of relational database. He described RDBMS in 1970. Then in 1974, structured query language appeared. And in 1978, IBM worked to develop Cord's ideas and released a product named System, or R. And in 1986, finally, IBM developed its first prototype of relational database and standardized by ANSI. The first relational database was released by Relational Software, which later came to be known as Oracle. So there are a lot of different types of commands in SQL. You can do a lot of things using SQL. Like you can create something. There are query for selecting something in the database. You can insert, you can update, you can delete and drop tables, databases. using SQL. So, very frankly speaking, as a data analyst or as a business analyst, you won't really be requiring so many commands. Like, the most important command, I guess, for a business analyst or a data analyst is the select command. Because as a data analyst or a business analyst, you're only required to fetch the data from the database and then perform analysis on that database. So, creating something in a database or updating the database is something which should be done by our database manager, not by an analyst, I believe. So mostly we'll be dealing with the select command here, and the select command is, as you can see here, basically it helps you retrieve certain records from one or more tables. So, okay, let me just quickly tell you what RDBMS is. So, RDBMS stands for Relational Database Management System, and it is the basis for SQL and for all the modern database systems like MS SQL Server, PostgreSQL, Oracle, MySQL, Access. And a relational database management system is a database management system that is based on relational model as introduced by EF Cord. So in RDBMS, basically in a database, there are more than one table, um, and every table has certain elements inside it. So creating a relation between these different tables inside a database is known as relational database. Now, let me just explain the elements which are there in a table. So, a table, it looks something like this, what we have already studied in last, where we were talking about spreadsheet. It used to look something like this. Similar is the case with the table. It contains rows, it contains columns, and there is a name to, and it contains fields. Fields are basically the name of every single column. So so yeah, what is field? Well, fields are the name of the columns which are there in the table. Like, if you look at this particular the table, you can see that there are 5 fields in this, namely ID, name, age, address, and salary. Now, what is a record in a table or a row? So, we know that rows are, these things, like we have ID1, there's a name, there's age, address, and salary. So this complete thing is known as one record or a row. And similarly, we have a lot of rows and a lot of columns, fields in a table. What is a column? We already discussed that. And what is a null value? Well, a null value is in a table is a value in a field that appears to be blank, which means a field with a null value is a field with no value. It doesn't mean that, that field contains 0. Instead, it does not contain any value. That is what a null value is in a table. So, well, when you want to learn programming, theory is something which you don't really want to you know uh, do a lot. Instead, you want to focus on practical knowledge. You want to just start writing the code, and that is how you learn coding. So that's what I wanted to. There are a lot of resources out there. I'll be sharing a lot of links, a lot of good resources where you can study all the theories you want. But for this webinar, I wanted to make it more practical, and I wanted that we should just write few SQL queries, and that is how we should be learning SQL. So now there is this website called hackerrank.com. I'll suggest you all guys to practice SQL here, and there are other programming languages also which you can practice. But since we are practicing SQL right now, so I'll suggest you all guys to make an account here and log into your account. When you log in, you'll have a dashboard. You can just go and choose the programming language you want to practice. In our case, we are going to learn SQL now, and I'll just go and now, since in this particular webinar we are only talking about basic select queries, let me just see all the basic select queries which are there. Now, we'll be solving around 4 to 5 questions, which will help you get an idea about how to write SQL queries. Now, this let us get started with the very first question we have. There is the solution which I have already written, so I'll just remove it. Now, this is a problem statement. Now, if you just go through the problem statement, it says that query all columns for all American cities in city with population larger than 100,000. The country code for America is USA. So what is going on here is we have a table named as city, and there are five different fields in that table, or there are five columns in that table, city, which are ID, name, country code, district, and population, and they have different types, and the types of all the fields or the columns have been mentioned here. So now, if you want to see, the data which is actually inside this particular table called city, what you can do is you can start with the select queries. Whenever you want to fetch something from a database, you have to write the select query. So you can start with the writing select, and after select you have to write the field name of the field which you want to look at. Now, as we know, there are five fields in this particular table known as city. Let's say we want to look at the names of the city which are there, so we'll write name here. After name, no, it starts with select. You want to select what field do you want to select. You have to write the name of the field there. Then from where do you want to select that, you have to write from, and then the name of the table. The name of the table is here is city. So that's what I have written, select name from city. And now let me just run this code. Now, if you see, we have, this is our output, and we have got 9 outputs, nine records here. The first record is Rotterdam and Scottsdale, Corona, Concord, and similarly, there are 9 records. This means that these are the names of the cities which are there in our table called as city. Now, if you want to see something else, you don't want to see the name, instead you want to see the ID of these particular cities, you can replace that field with ID, and you can just run the code again. Then you'll see the ID of all these cities has been shown to you. But maybe you want to see the ID and the name of the city both. So what you can do is you can just separate all these field values by a comma, using comma, and you can just run the code again. So you'll see in the output there will be 2 columns, namely the ID and the name. So this is the ID of the city, and this is the name of the city. Similarly, you can just keep on adding the fields which are there in the table. And just run this again, and you can see that this is the ID, this is the name of the city, and this is the country code of the city. Now, let's go back to the question we have, the problem statement. The problem statement says that we have to query all the columns for all American cities in city with population larger than 100,000. So what we can do here is, okay, so since we know that we have to query all the columns, what we can do is we can manually write the names of all the columns one by one by using the spaces. I can just write district, and then the last column, sorry, the last field, which is population from city. Now I have all the fields, in this particular table called city. Now there are two criteria in the problem statement. If you look at it, it says that all the columns for all American cities, it says that the city should be American city only, and the population should be larger than 100,000. Now, if I run this, you see that it is a wrong answer. But we do have all the columns here. Now we can see that, this is NLD. Most probably it stands for New Zealand. This is USA. All other city, country code you see, these are USA, but this is something which is not USA. Most probably it is New Zealand. But if you look at the population here, population for Colorado, this Boulder city is 91,000. Population for Fairfields city is 92,000. Similarly for Fall River it is 90,000. So all these three populations are less than 100,000. So we need to apply a filter here. There are two conditions. The first condition is the city should be an American city, so the country code should be, if you look at the problem statement, it says that country code for America is USA. So if you want to apply a condition, if you want to apply a filter, what you can do is you can write here where, and after where you can write all the conditions which you want to apply. Now the first condition we have is country code. We know that country code is a character. If you look at the type here, country code, it's a character, it's a string. So we have to write it in single quotes or a double quotes, USA. And we have, so this is basic Boolean algebra. Since it is mandatory, we are writing and. Had it been not mandatory, we could have written or here. The second condition is the population. So population should be greater than 100,000. Now if I run the code, it says that it's a correct answer. Now you can see all the cities are American city, and the population of all these cities are greater than 100,000. So this is basically how you write a basic SQL query. You start with the select statement, you write the name of all the fields you want, then you define from which particular city, from which particular table you want that those fields from. The name of the table here is city, so we have written city here. And then if you have any conditions, you can write those conditions after the where statement. Now let's move on to some other question. Basic select, and let's say we will solve the second question. Let's see what it is. It says that query the names of all American city in city with population larger than 120,000. Okay, so there are two things here. If you look at the question problem statement again, it says that query the names of all the American cities. So we only want one field here, which is the name. So we can just write select the name of the field we want, which is name, from the name of the table, which is city. Then we have two conditions here. The first condition is it should be an American city, the same as what we did in the last question. And the second is population should be larger than 120,000. So let me just write these two conditions here. Country code should be equal to USA, and population should be larger than 120,000. Now let me just run this code again, and it's a correct answer. Let me just go to the third question. So it's an easy one. It says that query all columns for every row in city table. So basically we have to query all the data which are there in city table with all the fields. So what we can do is we can similarly write the query which we wrote in the first question, where we wrote select, and then we wrote the name of all the fields which are there separated by comma. So that is something you can do, but that is not a very feasible thing. So what you can do is you can just write star here, and then from the name of the table. So basically what star does is it selects all the fields which are there in that table for you. So if you don't want all the fields, maybe if you want only 4 fields, then you have to manually write all the 4 fields. But if you want all the fields which are there in a table, you can just use the select star command. Star will select all the fields which are there, and then if you run the code, you'll see that you get what you wanted to. So similarly, there are other questions as well. So this says Japanese city's name. Okay, let's solve this as well. If you look at the question, it says that query the name of all the Japanese city in the table. So again, it is similar to the last question what we did. We have to select only one field, which is name, from the table which we have, the city table, where country code is equal to JPN. Sorry, JPN, as that is the country code for Japan. And let me just run the code, and we have the correct answer. Now, let me just move on to weather observation station one, and let me just solve this question. So here we have the name of the table here is station, and we have five fields here. The name of the fields are ID, city, state, latitude, and longitude, and the type of all the fields have been mentioned here. So the problem statement here is query the list of city and state from station table. So this is pretty simple. Again, we'll just write select city and state. Okay, city and state. These are the two, the fields which are we are supposed to query from the table station. Let me just run this code, and we have the correct answer. Okay, that was pretty easy. Again, let me just move on to another question, and let us solve weather observation 3. So so we have the same table again. But if you look at the problem statement, it says that query a list of city names from station with even ID numbers only. You may print the result in any order, but must exclude duplicate from your answer. Okay, so we only want one field here, which is city, from station, and the ID of that particular city should only be even. Okay, so this is little complex. Select, we want only one field, which is city, from the city, the table we want, which is station, where even ID numbers. So if you would have done programming, basic programming, about modulo. So there is this thing called modulo. What we can do here is we can use modulo ID modulo 2 equals to 0. So what we are doing here is we are saying that give me the name of all the cities from the table station where ID modulo 2 is equal to 0. Now ID modulo 2 means that ID is a number, divide that by 2, and if the resultant is 0, then only give me that. So if resultant will be 0 only in the case, sorry, remainder will be 0 only in the case where the number is even. So this condition should work for us. And if I try to run this code, okay, it says wrong answer. There is something we're missing out here. You may print the result in any order, but must exclude duplicate from your answers. Okay, so basically, in a database, a city would have been, printed more than once. Like there is Watkins here. Watkins might have been printed more than once. But they want us. The problem statement says it should be printed only once. So what you can do in that case is you can say distinct. There is this keyword called in SQL called distinct. Now, if you use distinct, the name of the city will be used only once, and there will be no repetition in the name of the cities. Now, it's the correct answer. So this is basically how you write basic SQL queries. This you have to start with the select query. If you want to fetch anything from the database, you have to write the fields of all the fields which you want from the table. Then you have to define the table from which you want these information to be extracted by writing from the name of the table, and then you have to put the conditions which are there after the where statement. Now there are a lot of other things, like there are aggregator functions, there are there are joins, in RDBMS there are more than one table, two there are multiple tables, and we want data from different tables, so in that case we want to join data from all these tables. So then we use join, so these are the things which we'll be discussing in next webinar. So I think that's it for this particular, I think that is more than enough for this particular webinar. And yeah, we'll be practicing. So in the next webinar, I'll be talking about aggregator function and join functions, joins in SQL. And again, I'll be demonstrating, I'll be solving few questions on HackerRank. And I'll suggest you guys also to go and select, complete all the basic select queries which are there on HackerRank. And if you guys have any doubt, you can reach out to me, So yeah, let me just have a Q&A session. If you guys have any questions, you can just ask me here. I'll have a pause of 30 seconds. Okay, so it seems like none of you have any doubts at the moment, but if you guys have any doubt, those people who were not able to join me live, if you're watching this afterwards, and if you guys have any doubt, you can just DM me on Slack, and I'll clear all the questions you have. And I'll also suggest you guys to, I'll be sharing few links, few resources with you guys where you can learn about theoretical part of the SQL. And of course there are a lot of good videos in Udacity which will help you. And if you want to practice, you can make an account on HackerRank, and I'll be sharing more resources with you where you can go and practice SQL. And in the coming lessons, I'll also be telling you how you can create your own database using a CSV file, and you can just play around, those database, and make your SQL much better. So that's it for this particular webinar, and thank you very much.